Collins. This is IL 579 residency interview with my mentor, Kyle Futrell, principal, Hopewell High School. There he is there. Today, Mr. Futrell, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the signature project that I worked on for this class and its effects on grade inflation. One thing that I noticed is out of the three classes that we did this stuff for, the average class grade, and I've shared some of this with Mr. Futrell beforehand for the sake of the length of the video, but basically class grade point average was high and achievement scores were low prior to the transition to virtual instruction. After the transition to virtual instruction, the class grade average went down and the achievement average went up, but those two numbers were much closer. And so I guess my question to you is, do you think grade inflation, plays a big part in hampering our overall achievement? I know GPA is very important to some of these kids, especially when seeking out opportunities for college. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on grade inflation and those results.
Actually, I think we have a lot of things going on here, looking at those numbers. But I guess just a quick answer to your first kind of general question as far as is grade inflation hampering student achievement overall? Yes, I think it is. I think we, with the way we do school traditionally, we train kids and reward kids for kind of playing school well. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If kids care about it, they know how to play school and get the grade that they want, really. And it's not always a great indication of what they've learned, right? And so I'm trying to kind of go systematically and not jump all over the map. Honestly, I think part of the reason behind that is teachers, just like most human beings, figure out a way to survive, and teachers very quickly learn that you can keep the line of parents at your door and emails in your inbox down if you keep grades a little higher.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they're just...
Even if it might be a false...
Correct. Right. And I don't think most teachers would look at it as a false measure, but they find ways to help kids get the grade they want to get. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And again, that's not something that's necessarily bad, but it is, it is a survival mechanism, I think, for teachers to try and just... teachers have a lot to do. You're busy as a teacher, and you don't need to be dealing, with 15 parent complaints every day on every test you get, and everything you do, and grades being low. And so I really think that's part of the reason behind it, I guess. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the kind of data you gave, one thing that really determines, I guess, is it grade inflation is kind of the first big question. Is, one, really the most important thing is the alignment of what you are teaching and what you're assessing to determine that achievement level, right? So, what is their grade every day based on, and then what are we using as our measure of achievement to say, yes, this is inflated or not? And generally, we think in terms of ACT at the high school, right? We see inflation all the time of a kid who gets to be into their junior year or senior, and they take the ACT, and they got a 4.0 GPA, and they make it 16 on the ACT.
Right.
You know what I mean? That is clear grade inflation. They're not achieving and haven't really learned the skills, operating at the top tier, to score kind of below average, or at least below the benchmark kind of level on an ACT. And so, anyway, looking at kind of the measures you used here, the first of all, let's kind of talk about that benchmark that our county uses. So that's a common assessment developed by all the teachers in the county. Should be a pretty objective, I would say, assessment of all the content standards and things you're supposed to teach. Right. And you've been involved in that pretty heavily. So if you think that's a good test, yes, then there's clearly, some inflation was happening with quarter three, with those grades being a lot higher than the benchmark. Some of it also obviously could be that is one big test that kids had to remember things from, 9 weeks worth of, or I guess in our case, 4.5 weeks worth of material for, and so they may just not perform as well in that, generally speaking, because it's a bigger chunk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than they would in smaller pieces along the way, which, again, if we're teaching skills, though, and not, memorizing content, then we shouldn't have had to memorize 4.5 weeks worth of stuff if it's a good test, right?
Yeah.
They should have developed the skills. And so, if that's a good test, and I think it is, I've seen the ninth grade history benchmark. I think it's pretty good. It's a lot of analysis and interpreting data and things like that. Critical reading and cause-effect kind of things. And so I think it's a good test. And so, yeah, definitely like there was. I guess my question with the second quarter assessment that we had to use with Edgenuity, that final exam that we used, obviously the Edgenuity final exam is going to be very closely aligned to the stuff they were supposed to learn in that Edgenuity quarter, right? Because it's the exact same program, and they built the test based on that material. So I think the alignment there is spot on perfect, probably. And then I guess then the difference would be, what kind of test is that? You know what I mean?
It's very similar. It had the critical thinking, cause and effect. It was a tremendous amount of primary source reading, things like that. It really wasn't a lot of regurgitation.
Right.
No dates or what date did this happen or that happened. It was. I thought it was a pretty good test.
Okay. Well, yeah. Then if that's the case, and it's a very comparable test to the benchmark, that we gave, then I would say, it definitely looks pretty clear that fourth quarter of them being more independent, I think is probably, if you're asking me kind of what I think might be the most contributing factor, I think it's the independent nature of that learning that had to take place. They were responsible almost 100% for learning the content. And the
you think this may develop some long-term intrinsic motivation, or?
I think it should really, we need to look at things like this and numbers like this, and hopefully will help convince us of some of the adjustments and changes that we need to make when we are in the four walls of the school.
Right.
You know what I mean? And some educators have been kind of preaching this for a while now, that we need to, learning has to be more engaging and more independent, on their part, and things like that.
Yeah, I really feel like I don't want to put the training wheels back on. I feel like they were taken off. I definitely want to interact more. I really miss the interaction with the students and the relationship, because I believe that those things really can, help push a kid as well as the student-centered nature of it. But I think there's a balance between the two.
Sure.
Whether we can find without taking those training wheels off.
Sure. And like I said, I think the key, the student-centeredness of this Edgenuity stuff we were doing, obviously, like you said, helped their achievement in the end, and their skill development and their grasp of the material and all of that. It helped, and I think it would help even more if we could have that kind of independent learning and that kind of student-centered learning happening, like you said, in a classroom with an expert, someone who can then take that learning and give individual attention to the kids that are in there, and really hone in on what they're not doing well on, and then you help them with those things, and I think we can move this up a lot. So I think it's a very valuable set of data that, like I said, that should be pretty eye-opening. That there's something to this.
Yeah, it really is. It was very surprising to me. That it was that kind of black and white almost.
Right. And like I said, for a while now, studies have shown the effects of student-centered learning, but as educators we've just been doing things the same way a long time. You know what I mean? And we do things similar to how we were taught things, and those kind of things. So making big changes to that is difficult and tough. And so if there's one good thing that's coming out of this, maybe it will kind of hit the reset button on the way we think about things and help us do things that are going to help kids learn it better.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.